What's happening, everybody? Welcome back. In today's video I'm going to go through all these settings, equipment, post-processing that I do for my motovlog, so you can get footage similar or the same as mine. If you want to just copy everything I'm doing, that's totally fine by me. So yeah, we're going to jump on the bike and go for a ride and talk about the settings I'm using. Then we'll go through all the hardware and the cameras and show you where I placed a microphone and the settings and the camera that I use. And then we're going to jump into the computer and I'm just going to quickly show you how I post-process all of my videos if you want to get the same kind of colors and look in terms of stabilization and everything, because I'm stabilizing in post. So let's jump on the bike, go for a ride, and we'll talk about the camera settings that I'm using. I'll put them all up on the screen so you can see, and then I'll see you back here in the garage. Alright guys, so we're here on the bike. Now the first thing you want to do before talking about any settings or anything like that is, if you're using two cameras, Final Cut or Premiere or whatever editing software you're using uses audio to synchronize tracks when you're using like a multicam setup. This camera can quite often not hear anything other than wind noise, so it can be quite tricky to synchronize the clips with audio. So every time you press record on both of these cameras, just give it a little clap, and then you can use that visual clap to synchronize up and post. But let's get riding. Now the settings I'm using are very different between these two cameras. The one on my helmet we'll go through first. And there's some important things to remember when you're doing this to be able to make sure you get gyro data in the camera in order for Gyroflow, the software, to work. So I'm using a 4K resolution with 25p as my frame rate, and then I'm using 4:3 aspect ratio, which is one of those things that the camera needs to record gyro data. So 4:3 aspect ratio, not 16:9. The next thing you need to make sure you do is put your lens into wide mode, not super view or linear, because again it's not going to record gyro data. So again, 4K 25p with a 4:3 aspect ratio, and you're having your lens in the wide mode. And then the next and last final important thing to remember is having rock steady turned off completely. If you do those steps, everything's going to be fine. You'll record gyro data and you'll be able to stabilize it in post with Gyroflow and get really nice looking stabilized but true to life footage. The next thing you're going to want to do is set up your exposure and white balance and color mode. So go ahead and switch your camera to the Pro mode and put it in D-Log M, which gives you D-Log and 10-bit color. That's going to make it much better to color grade later on, and the way I do it with my LUTs is just pretty much a one-click setting. So yeah, D-Log M with 10-bit color and you're set. The next thing to make sure you do is lock off your white balance, and this also goes for both cameras, having it locked off at 5600 Kelvin or 5600K, you'll see in the menu. That just makes sure the color is accurate between both cameras, and you know, it's consistent. It's not chopping and changing all the time if you have it on auto. 5600K works really well for daylight. If you were riding at night, you'd probably go a little bit lower, like around 3800, and that's going to make your footage a little bit bluer. And if you want it warmer, you're going to go higher on the numbers, like 6500 or something like that. Now in terms of exposure for the helmet cam, you're going to want to go ahead and set your exposure to manual and change your shutter speed to 1/50th of a second if you're using a 25p frame rate. If you're using 30p, you're going to want to be at 60th of a second, and if you're using 50p, you're going to want to be at 100th of a second. That's a cool little triumph there. Shooting at 50th of a second is just going to get you that natural motion blur with all this stuff whizzing past just as you see it and with your eyeballs basically. But with the 50th of a second shutter, if you just use the camera like normal, everything's going to be way overexposed and everything's just going to look white. So you need to put an ND filter on, which is just like sunglasses for your lens. And I find for a bright sunny day like this, at a 50th of a second, a ND32 filter works really, really well. If you were like at sunset or something like that, you'd probably be at 16th of a second. And then if you switch over to night, you'll just take the filter off and you'll be fine. And the final setting in terms of exposure is just setting your ISO. So I have it in auto with a minimum of 100 and a maximum of 3200. And that just allows the camera to like adjust if you go through a tunnel or under a bridge or through like a tree canopy or something like that, so your footage isn't going to look dark. But other than that, that's your exposure settings. That's everything you need to know for the helmet camera. This is just the way I do it. But in terms of the bar setup, I'm not using any manual settings or anything like that, other than having it in D-Log M 10-bit color and setting my white balance to 5600. Otherwise everything is auto. I have stabilization on, just on the standard Rocksteady. I have the super view mode on the lens. Is it super view? Something like that, the widest lens. And I have auto shutter speed, auto ISO, everything, and no ND filter. The reason I do that is because it's just really hard to get clean looking footage when it's hard mounted to a bar that's vibrating constantly and going over bumps and everything like that. It's really hard for the in-camera stabilization or Gyroflow to make it look nice and smooth, and you just lose a lot of quality when you're doing stuff like that. You could set the shutter speed to like 1/200th of a second and use an ND8 filter or something like that, but you know, this isn't my main angle. You guys are generally looking out the front of the helmet with me, and this is just kind of a B camera to make videos a little bit more interesting. So that's the way I have that camera set up. Also, this is the camera that I'm using now to jump off the bike and do walk-arounds and talk to you guys and stuff like that. And having it all set up with stabilization and the mode just straight out of the box works really well for me. Now the last thing I'll touch on is the audio levels. There's two things to think about with audio levels. Some people think that you can just, you know, turn the level down and everything's going to be fine. And that's true for the most part, but when you're riding a motorbike and the microphone is inches away from your mouth hole, the microphone themselves, the lavalier themselves, have a decibel limit, and most of them are around 120 decibels. So if you're kind of yelling into the mic or anything like that, it's not going to matter what you have your camera level set to, it's going to peak anyway. So there's kind of an art to it where you're kind of like talking at a reasonable volume and not trying to overspeak your, you know, over talk your exhaust. I'm pretty shit at it, but you know, that's something to think about. And saying that, I do have the camera audio on the helmet cam set to minus 10 decibels, minus 10 dB, and that just ensures that any volume that's not restricted by the microphone itself is going to be limited, and it's not going to peak out in terms of camera settings. So yeah, now there's my radar going off. Oh, there's a cop car there. Oh, we just got a live demo of that. Anyway, that's pretty much the camera settings. If I've forgotten anything, like I said, I'll put a comment in the description or in the comment section. And if you guys have any questions about these settings, just drop a comment below. I'm just going to do a quick detour and get some coffee beans from my favorite local, Sozo Coffee, just around the corner here. If you guys are locals, come and check out Sozo. I'm here most days, and yeah, really great place to get coffee, and they roast all their own beans. I sound like I'm sponsored by all sorts of companies, but I promise you I'm not sponsored by anyone on this channel at all yet anyway. DJI, if you want to send me an Osmo Action 5, go ahead. Right, I'm going to run in and get these coffee beans, even though I don't have a bag. Looks like I'm pregnant now. I don't have a bag, so I got my coffee beans under my shit. Okay, I'm gonna head home and we'll chuck this footage in the computer and show you guys how I put it all together. So there you have it, guys. That's my camera settings that I'm using on both of my action cameras and my audio settings. So I'm going to go through now and show you how it's mounted and where exactly I place the microphone and just how I have it set up on the bike. It's a pretty simple explanation. There's nothing really complicated to it, but we'll show you the equipment, the setup, the exact gear that I'm using in terms of filters and microphones, and then we'll jump into the computer and do some editing. So as I was saying on the ride, I'm obviously using the Osmo Action 4s. I bought the main one I have on my helmet before the 5 Pro came out, and the second one I bought was on a Black Friday sale, and it was like less than 400 New Zealand dollars. So I know from my experience as a professional wedding photographer, you know, upgrading gear in small increments like that isn't always going to get you a visual difference. You're not going to see it. There can be other benefits like slightly longer battery and stuff, but the Action 5 Pro battery can actually go in this one anyway if you want that longer battery. And otherwise, I don't have anything lacking from this camera that I could use on the new one. In terms of the helmet setup, I'm using the Motomounts. It's like a 3D printed company that a guy in New Zealand makes these. I'm not sponsored by anybody in this video at all, so but I'll put a link to his website in the description if you want to check that out. But yeah, it's a really clean mount, and I've used them for all my helmets in the past. The thing I like about it is it's kind of where it's mounted on the camera is just kind of off center a little bit, so the footage is a little bit more centered than if you had a mount that was, you know, bang on the middle of the helmet, because obviously the lens is slightly off center, and it's really, you know, it uses good 3M tape. It's not coming off. I haven't had to glue them or anything, and I've used them on multiple helmets and never had a single issue. So that's what I use. In terms of my helmet setup, everything I use is DJI, from the microphone to the camera to the filters. With the mount, I'm just using the standard DJI, the kind of one that has a slightly longer neck to it on the helmet, with a very small extension that just allows me to get the right angle I want, but keep it very close and compact to the helmet. And then I'm using with the settings I'm using at 50th of a second, I'm using the DJI ND32 filter to get that, you know, low shutter speed to get the motion blur I want. Now with the microphone, I'm using the DJI Osmo mic adapter. It's the standard one. It's a pretty cheap unit, and it plugs straight into the side of the camera. It's not like an external thing or anything like that. And then the microphone I'm using is also a DJI Lav mic. It's a pretty cheap unit compared to other like Sennheisers or anything like that, and the levels coming out of it, the sensitivity is pretty decent. It only really peaks if I really kind of talk loudly, or if I'm kind of yelling out my helmet so another biker can hear me or something like that. Otherwise the sound quality is really good. And where I have it tucked has changed over the years. I'm pretty fussy when it comes to audio, and I want to get the best quality I can get. The way I have it now is the best I've had it so far, and it's just actually tucked inside the cheek pad, like in the foam. So I took the pad out and I cut a very small amount of foam out of the inside of it and just tucked the microphone inside there. So it's only kind of just sticking out of the cheek pad, and there's a fluffy on the mic as well. So my aim is to minimize wind noise as much as possible. But I also noticed a lot of noise coming from the actual outer surface hitting the wind as well when I had the microphone behind the cheek pad. And this has kind of minimized that noise by quite a lot. So yeah, if you're noticing still quite a lot of wind noise or anything like that, try cutting the cheek pad. Cheek pads aren't expensive, and you can get them for most helmets pretty cheap as like spare parts. In terms of the bar setup, I'm obviously not using any filter on that one. I tried different settings, different filters, but with any kind of shutter speed under 200, 250th of a second, you're getting just really weird artifacts and wobbliness and shaking from the stabilization in camera. And Gyroflow does a better job, but not that much better. And it's not the angle I'm using most of the time. So this one, I'm just raw dogging it. There's no filter, the exposure is on auto. Otherwise, everything else, like I was saying on the ride video, is the same as my helmet camera, white balance locked off and all that kind of stuff. And that one just sits on the bars with an also DJI mount. That wasn't too expensive either. I think it was like 75 bucks for the whole thing with the arm and the mount and everything. So that works really well. Other than that, let's just jump into the computer and try some editing, and I'll show you guys how I process all this video afterwards and how I put it together. So let's go upstairs. Alright guys, so we've just got back from the ride, and I'm importing all the footage into my hard drive here, which I have set up. So these two files are my bar setup, and these two are the files from the helmet camera. As you can see, if I preview these, we don't need to do anything with it. It's stabilized and it's all good to go. But this one from the helmet is going to need to be stabilized first. While that's importing, we'll go ahead and open up Gyroflow and show you guys the settings I'm using here. You can see it's split it into two different files, although this is just one recording, but it kind of gets to a limit where it will stop at around 20 minutes, but that's fine. You can just put these back to back in your editing software and they'll match up perfectly with the audio and everything like that. Alright, now that's finished importing, we'll go ahead and drag one of those files into Gyroflow, and that's going to load up the gyro data and everything like that, and it's also going to convert it to 16:9 footage from the 4:3 that you had. You don't have to do that, you can change it manually, but either way you can see all the gyro data down here, and if we go ahead and play it, you can see it's stabilized. It's to a smaller amount than it is with the in-camera stabilization, but if I turn that off, you can see the difference. It's much more shaky. So we go default, and then I have smoothness set to 1%. That's the smallest amount you can go, but it just gives you, you know, just enough to take all the kind of micro jitters out of it and keep the footage looking realistic without getting any like crazy blooming on the highlights or anything like that. 1% with a zoom limit of 120. You can copy all these settings for yourself. Down here I'm using H.265 because that just retains the 10-bit color on the export. Again, just copy all these. Nothing down here is being changed at all. So because there's two files, I'm going to go ahead and add this one to the render queue. Select the folder that you want them to go into, and then I'm going to drag the other one in there and just do the same settings because that's that piggybacked file from it splitting up. Add to render queue as well. So now if we open the render queue up, you can see there's two there, and I'm just going to go ahead and start exporting them. So it is an extra step that you kind of have to do, but if you want the footage to look the way mine is, this is how you go about it. So I'll check back in with you guys. This is saying 18 minutes for I think it's about a 27-minute video. So that's not too bad, but this is a MacBook Pro with the M3 Max CPU in it. But either way, I'll check back in with you guys once this is done, and then we'll be finished with our Gyroflow setup and we'll go straight into our editing software. Okay guys, so Gyroflow's just about to finish, and there it go, it's all done. So we're going to go ahead and open up Final Cut again and import these new stabilized files and the helmet camera footage that we have back into Final Cut. Here they are here, and then we just need to grab our helmet files as well, I mean the bar files, sorry, and import them. This is getting a bit messy here now. You guys aren't going to have all this stuff, but the next thing we're going to do, quite an important step, is grab the two bar files that we have. So there's that one and then that one, and then we're just going to go over to info and name the camera bars, and then these ones we're going to do the same but name it helmet. That's just going to separate the two angles into two separate angles with the multicam. So with that being said, now select all of the 4 clips. Now right click on all those and go new multicam clip. In here, just copy these settings, but you can go use audio for synchronization. It probably won't work in this case, but we'll give it a go anyway. Angle assembly by camera name, that's what is going to split them up into the two angles, and then angle clip ordering into content created. And otherwise, we're just going 4K resolution with 25p, etc. You can name it here, and then we'll just click OK. Like I said, it's going to try and run through and do it by the audio, but it probably won't work because, you know, of all the wind noise. It may work for the first 2 clips because the bike wasn't running, but we'll find out in a minute. So it spit out a new clip here. We'll just drag that down into the rest of this video. And then if you double click on that, it's going to go in and show you all the clips. I think it's actually done it right. It has. Okay, so it's done it with the audio, which is great. I'm just going to reorder these, so we'll put the helmet as camera angle 1 and the bars as angle 2. I'm just going to mute this bar audio because it's not really usable. I'm going to do all my audio adjustments in here in the multicam clip. I'll do it manually anyway so you can see. All I'm doing first is adding a channel EQ and then go to levels and add a limiter. It's important you do them in that order as well because we're going to make some adjustments with the channel, and then the limiter is going to make sure nothing is peaked out. So firstly, I'm just going to add a little bit of treble and just cap that off. Drop the midtones a little bit. We'll press play so we can hear it.
Photographers, and you don't know that, that just makes sure your white balance is
add a bit of bass,
and 5600
and
is
again
like
clip the ends off.
They call it.
From there, because we have a running minus 12 dB or minus 10 dB in the Osmo, we're going to bring that up, open the limiter up and bring that up until it's sitting around minus 6 dB. So I'm going to go about plus 10, and then otherwise everything else just stays as it is. and that sounds good. So we'll copy that settings over. So if you click that one and go Shift Command Q, and then click this one and Shift Command V, and just copy those settings over like so. Now if we go back out of there, we have the demo clip as we made the multicam clip. And with Final Cut, all you got to do is go View, Angles, and that's going to show our two angles there as we go through and edit the video. So there's three icons here. These are important to note. This one is video and audio, this one is video only, and this one is audio only. So right at the start of the clip, we're going to go and just click helmet, and that's going to set our video and audio settings to like the audio to come out of here and the video to come out of here. Now we're just going to check the video option, video only. So now when we go through,
Premiere or whatever editing software.
So now when we go through, we can just click these and it's going to make the cuts down here as we're watching it. You can also just press the 2 and the 1 to go through the angles, but that's how you switch between the two angles as often as you want, and it's going to cut the video out. So if we've got that angle there, we'll just press 2 and it's going to cut to my bar setup, and then hit 1 and it's going to go back to the bike setup. So with all the audio being done and everything like that, we will go through and just color grade the footage straight in here before we chop it up. So to do that, I'm just using my standard GoPro LUT, which you can buy in the store. There's a link in the description, and we'll drag that straight onto the clip, and that's job done. If we turn that on and off, that's how it looks. And there shouldn't be really any need to adjust anything, but you can do so if you wish. But that's how I color grade my videos. Now I'm just going to copy those settings and put them all on the other ones, just getting rid of the audio. So then it's on the bars clip as well. So yeah, job done. So now we just click out of there, and then literally from this point, it's just going through and choosing when you want to cut between the two angles. So for example, we can just play through the clips, and if I want to jump to the bar setup and get a view of me, I can just click that, and then I can go, if I want to go back to the helmet setup, I can click that and go back, and it's going to make those cuts live as you're playing through the video. So if I play through now, you can see that's made those sections where we decided to split it off. And that's pretty much it, guys. Once you're done with that, you just go ahead and export the file using the settings. I just use H.264 with the making sure your resolution's right and everything like that, and you're done. So I hope that was helpful. But there you have it, guys. That's how I film, edit, the gear I use, how I export everything, all my settings for motovlog. So if, like I said in the start of this video, if you want to copy the settings I'm using, go for gold. It doesn't bother me at all. I hope you guys can get out there and create some cool stuff. I'll see you in the next video real soon.